Welcome, and good day to everyone. The topic for today is Shabbos preparations, avoiding prohibited acts on Shabbos. What can we do before Shabbos to avoid coming to any restricted actions on Shabbos? The great leader and Kabbalist, Rabbi Chaimowitz of blessed memory, who lived about 350 years ago, writes in his classic compilation, Shnei Luchos Habris, Yom HaShabbos, the day of Shabbos, hu nekudas hamerkaz, it is the centermost point, she'aleh tesoiviv agulas hashishus yomim, that surrounding Shabbos revolve all the days of the week. We generally view it as if Shabbos is our weekend. After we go through everything in the week, we sort of come back to ourselves, rest up Shabbos from everything that went on, and then we're ready to start the next week, the week being the focal point of our attention. But really, says the Shloah HaKadosh, it's just the opposite. Shabbos is the focal point of our attention. Shabbos is the centermost point upon which the entire week revolves around. Now, it's very hard to understand, because if you would ask us, you would say, well, when are we most active? When do we actually do the most? When do we accomplish the most? It's during the week, during the weekdays. Shabbos is just sort of our day off. It doesn't really count, so to speak. So why would the Shloah HaKadosh tell us that the day of Shabbos is really the middlemost point of the week? And here's the idea. When we focus on what we're trying to do technically in the world, the weekdays are probably the centermost point of our week. But when we focus on ourselves, Shabbos is the center point of the week. From the moment that Shabbos goes out until the next week when Shabbos comes in, we are pulled in so many different ways. There's so many different things that are pulling us to each and every side, almost like magnets. It's at times overwhelming. There are distractions. There are sometimes disturbances. And very often, we can hardly even think clearly. Finally, comes the day of Shabbos. On Shabbos, we don't turn on electricity. We don't travel long distances. We are usually don't have to do anything technically. That's obligatory. And so therefore, what Shabbos does is it gives us relief from all the different pulls. We have a day off. We don't have to be distracted. We don't have to be pulled. What Shabbos allows us on a deeper level is to come back to ourselves. So Shabbos really is our starting point. It's our anchor. From the Shabbos, we then branch out to all the things we need to do during the week. Once we complete our whole week, we come back in, so to speak, to the Shabbos. We come back into a place that we can actually hear ourselves. The reason that this is so important is because it gives us an understanding of all these restrictions that God gave us on Shabbos. It seems when it comes to the laws of Shabbos that you can't do this, we can't do this, have to do this, all these different rules and regulations. Really, the goal of all of those restrictions and regulations really is just that we should be free of all the distractions. The goal of all the obligations and restrictions is really just that we should come back to discover ourselves. It's a real gift. And this brings us to the topic for today, and that is preparations for Shabbos. What can we do before Shabbos to avoid the restricted activities on Shabbos? We know that from the time that the Torah was given at Sinai, God told Moshe that there are 39 restricted acts. In total, there are 39 acts that are prohibited to do for a Jewish person on Shabbos. Not all of those acts are so hard to refrain from. For example, painting. We don't necessarily have to go and paint on Shabbos. Tanning. We don't have to tan leather on Shabbos. However, there are, from the number of prohibited acts, a number of them that really apply to us almost every single Shabbos. Many apply to the preparation of food. And a lot of times, when we're in the midst of preparing food for Shabbos, it can be very easy to come to overlook some of those restrictions. So we wanted to go over today certain practices that many Jewish families have to do before Shabbos comes in order to avoid the restrictions on Shabbos. We'll go through about 4 of the prohibited acts, and we'll see what can be done before Shabbos so as not to come to possibly forget about them on the day of Shabbos. If a person were to be careful of these general 4 prohibitions, if a person were to do generally what's done on Erev Shabbos to avoid these prohibitions, they will probably have avoided most of all the challenging situations that could come up in Shabbos. And that's why these acts are generally done prior to Shabbos. So, what we're going to go over today are 4 different prohibitions and what we can do before Shabbos to avoid them challenging us on the day of Shabbos. The first point for today is that it's prohibited to mix 2 food substances that then become one. It's prohibited to mix 2 food substances that become one if they thicken each other. And we'll give an example. The classic form of this is the way that bread is made. We know in order to make bread, you need dough. Dough has 2 main components, flour and water. Before those 2 substances are mixed, each one is generally loose. The flour is sort of loose, and the water is certainly loose. When you mix the 2, they combine into one substance. They become one dough that's thicker than each of the original substances. That act is called in halacha lush, translated as kneading. It's prohibited for us to knead dough on Shabbos. And in general that means it's prohibited to mix any 2 substances that are more loose that become thicker and become united as one substance on Shabbos. And so therefore, what could be a common issue is a person wants to make egg salad. How do you make egg salad? You take an egg and you mash it or you chop it up. That's fine. But now you want to add mayonnaise. Let's look at the 2 substances. Mayonnaise, it's pretty loose. The egg itself, when it's chopped up, is also loose, like particles. When you mix the 2 and it becomes egg salad, it becomes sort of like one unit. The mayonnaise and the egg combine to become one unit that's thicker than either of the first substances. It would be prohibited to mix mayonnaise with finely chopped egg on Shabbos. Since many people do have the custom of eating egg salad on Shabbos, so therefore we want to be careful not to come to this situation, not to face the challenge of this prohibited act on Shabbos. And therefore, one of the Friday preparations by many Jewish families is to prepare the egg salad before Shabbos. Take the eggs and mix them with the mayonnaise even before Shabbos. Similarly, any 2 substances that are generally loose that combine to become one and thicken each other should be performed before Shabbos. The second point that we wanted to discuss, the second prohibited act that might be challenging, it's prohibited for us to grind any food that grows from the ground into very tiny particles. Grinding is prohibited. This is called in Hebrew toichen. And the classic example of it is what takes place with grains. When a person wants to make bread, he takes the wheat kernels and he grinds them. That's the only way he can get to have flour. Once he has the flour, he can then mix it with water, make the dough, and make bread. But first he has to take the grains and grind them. It's prohibited for us to grind the kernels into very fine particles on Shabbos. And so therefore, anything that's similar to that is also prohibited. To take any fruit or vegetable and even cut it with a knife, but into very small pieces, would be prohibited to do on Shabbos. And so therefore, for example, if a person wants to make a salad with very, very small pieces of vegetables, or they would like to dice an onion, it would be prohibited to do on Shabbos. If they want to take walnuts and ground them, or even pieces of walnuts and make them even smaller, it would be prohibited to do on Shabbos. And so therefore, this act is generally practiced by Jewish families already before Shabbos. Any family that wishes to eat a very finely cut salad with very tiny pieces, small pieces of vegetables, they would make the salad before Shabbos. If a person wants to dice an onion and have small pieces of onion, they would cut the onion before Shabbos. They want to crush walnuts, crush the walnuts before Shabbos. So this is the second point in terms of preparations for Shabbos that a Jewish family would generally do in order to avoid restrictions on Shabbos. We'll review now. The first point was not to mix any two substances that harden or thicken to become like one. And so therefore we'd make all types of salads that might cause a thickening. We'd make it before Shabbos, such as egg salad. A second type of preparation is we wouldn't grind or chop into very, very small particles vegetables or fruit on Shabbos. And so therefore, if we would like those types of salads, we would make them before Shabbos. The third restricted activity that we're going to talk about today is cutting something to a size. Cutting something to a size, obviously if a person would use a scissor and cut a piece of paper to an actual size, that's prohibited to do on Shabbos. It's considered an accomplished act. A person cuts something to a certain size. But here's the thing. If a person has paper that has a perforation and he rips it at the perforated point, it would also be considered cutting to size, because that's the point of the perforation. And so therefore, we want to avoid this issue when it comes to Shabbos. If a person needs paper towels, if a person needs silver foil, we'll be careful to separate and make all of those pieces even before Shabbos. If it comes Shabbos already and a person did not separate any paper towels, he could use the paper towels as long as they're connected to the original roll, but he cannot rip them on Shabbos. And so therefore a common activity as preparation for the Shabbos by many Jewish families is to set aside, tear off already all the paper towels, aluminum foil, and even paper that needs to be used for the restrooms. We don't want to tear it on the perforation on Shabbos. We get it all ready before Shabbos. So this is something that a person should try to do already before Shabbos comes in. The fourth restricted activity that we wanted to discuss is the idea of completing a utensil. It's prohibited for us to complete any utensil on Shabbos. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to go to a manufacturing plant and go and make dishes or plates or cups. But what it does mean, that if in some small way, even in a small way, a utensil comes about through our action, we wouldn't do it on Shabbos. The place that this most applies is in regard to bottle caps, and according to the halachic ruling of one of the great halachic authorities of the previous generation. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, of blessed memory, understood that there's a difference in bottle caps between the plastic ones and the metal ones. The plastic ones, before they're actually put on the bottle, are already complete caps. They already have their form as a utensil. They're then put with a machine on top of a bottle and fastened. But they already exist as a complete utensil before Shabbos. When we go and open them on Shabbos, it's not a problem. We're not really creating anything. But the metal bottle caps, in general, are put on by a machine when they're manufactured from a plate of metal. The plate of metal is extended above the bottle. A machine comes down and actually cuts and forms the bottle cap on top of the bottle. It was never really a utensil before it was put onto the bottle. Once it's on the bottle, it's totally unusable until we actually open it. If a person opens metal bottle caps on Shabbos, according to Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, it would be considered then having completed the utensil of that cap. And so therefore, if it comes out on Shabbos and a person needs to open one of these, it would be necessary that it should not become a utensil to actually ruin it a little bit by making a small puncture in the bottle cap top. The best eitzah, the best advice, of course, would be to try and open all the bottle caps, certainly the metal ones, before Shabbos. So therefore, on Friday already, generally a Jewish family would go through their food items, they'd see the drinks that they have to use, they'd try to open all the bottle caps or the cartons from the drinks that they have to use already before Shabbos. Not only that, but even all the foodstuffs that we want to use on Shabbos that are closed, we would try to open up before Shabbos. The reason for this doesn't necessarily have to do with a Torah restriction, but it's a rabbinic restriction to destroy anything on Shabbos. When we rip open a package and it has letters, it has writing, or it has an image on it, and we destroy the writing, we destroy the image, we're doing something that's rabbinically incorrect on Shabbos. Obviously, you could try to open the package in such a way where you don't rip any letters or any images, and that would be fine on Shabbos. But Jewish families try their best, and they try to open not only bottles, but all foodstuffs on Erev Shabbos. So to review, the general activities that are done before Shabbos comes, as preparation, that we shouldn't come to a challenge of any restricted activity on Shabbos, would be probably four main activities. Number one, make any type of salad that becomes like one unit and becomes thicker before Shabbos. Number two, grind up any fruits or vegetables that you want to use in their ground form from before Shabbos. Number three, make sure that you rip any perforated paper or silver foil pieces that you need from before Shabbos, so it should be ready for use on Shabbos. Number four, open up any bottles of foodstuffs, cartons that you have that need to be used on Shabbos, open up before Shabbos comes. If we're able to do this as preparation of Shabbos, then probably we'll have much less challenge of coming to any prohibited restriction on Shabbos. Once we could do this, then we merit on the day of Shabbos to actually experience the lack of distractions, the lack of pulls, the lack of clarity. We're able to actually focus on ourselves. May God help, and we be able to prepare adequately each week before the Shabbos, so that when it comes the moment to receive the Shabbos, we can actually feel that special day that Hashem gives us as a gift. We could spend the day together in clarity with God and with ourselves.